Sorry.
No, it's all good.
That's important.
So, Steve, before I let you wrap up, you didn't mention about Rick Wolff and Little League. I think there was some stuff with pitching and batting that the two of you guys had discussed on his show. I think it'd be great if you could give us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, Rick Wolff has had that show, Sports Edge, on WFAN for over 20 years. Sunday mornings at 7 or 8, depending on the time of year, 1 hour show. I recommend it to everyone with a kid, a grandkid, anyone who's between the ages of 5 and 21 playing any kind of sports. It's called the Sports Edge. But he's an incredible guy. And when my kids were young, he was very helpful to me. But eventually I became one of his go-to guys. I sub-hosted for him a few times. And we did what I think, and most credit to Rick, we did two incredible things with respect to Little League baseball in the short and baseball in general in a bigger picture. And the first thing, the thing that is most important, I think, was Little League never had pitch counts. There you could throw for 6 innings, and if anyone played Little League, they know with, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, especially the 12-year-olds pitching, you can pitch 6 innings, you can throw 50, 60, 70 pitches. You can throw 130, 140, 150 pitches, usually depending on how intelligent your coach is, or maybe how much the coach wants to win. But in any event, Little League eventually went from innings to pitch counts, and they got Dr. James Andrews, the most famous to this day Tommy John surgery guy, the go-to guy for professional baseball players. And he came up with pitch counts and days of rest. And I remember when he announced it, he announced 85 pitches. If you threw between 66 and 85 pitches, you then needed 4 days off. And there were other dates for 3 days, 2 days, other pitch counts. The main one, though, was, up to 85 pitches. You couldn't throw 86, so you could pitch to the last batter maybe. But then you needed 4 days off. And it was presented to the Little League. Unbeknownst to James Andrews, when the Little League came out, they announced that the 85 pitch count was going to be 3 days of rest, not 4. And in the crazy Williamsport tournament that, ESPN pays millions of dollars every year, that was going to go down to 2 days of rest. And when they announced that, I called Rick right away. I knew they were messing, not with the pitch counts per se, but with the days of rest. And it was very easy to figure out with 2 days of rest, 85 pitches, you could literally, as a 12-year-old, or maybe even an 11-year-old, throw 255 pitches in 7 days. And I did some research, and, the only pitcher that had done that in the prior season was like CC Sabathia. And that might have been the time when he was pitching on 3 days rest for the Brewers. I'm not sure of the year. But it was very obvious that they had messed around. And Rick, God bless him, interviewed Steve Keener, the president of Little League, on the radio, on WFAN, and got him to say, Rick explained the change in the days of rest, which Keener knew about. And Rick said, look, you can throw a ton of pitches. And Keener said, if Dr. Andrews comes to me with that, I'll look into it. Unbeknownst to Keener, I later interviewed Dr. Andrews on tape, which I still have somewhere. And I told them that they had changed the days of rest on them. They didn't change the pitch counts. They kept the pitch counts. And that's what everybody focused on. Nobody focused on the days of rest. And when I told him that, he was very upset. And I don't know that he believed me. I'm a guy calling out of the blue, but WFAN, I'd like to interview you, blah, blah, blah. But it had to be in the back of his mind. And what happened from that day forward, it was probably a good 3 years later, but eventually Dr. Andrews did speak to Steve Keener. I don't know when. I don't know how long it took after the conversation. And Andrews clearly said, what, are you kidding me? You made 4 days of rest, 3 days of rest, and you made it 2 days of rest in the crazy tournament? And that's exactly what happened. So eventually, 3, maybe 4 years later, they changed the days of rest back to what Dr. Andrews had recommended like 4 years before. The side thing of that is the 1 year I really looked at it, there were 2 kids who pitched for Ohio, the Ohio team in the World Series. One kid was named Kyle Kottkamp. They didn't throw 255 pitches in 7 days, but they threw like 230, maybe 237. There were 2 kids. And later they had on HBO Real Sports, the one that Brian Gumbel hosts, they had a thing on Tommy John surgery for young kids. And they had the two pitchers, I think they were both from Ohio. Kyle Camp definitely was. Those two pitchers who threw the most in the Little League World Series both had Tommy John surgery by the time they were 16 years old. And the well-known doctor in Ohio, Dr. Kremchek, I think his first name was Tim, he went on HBO Real Sports and said, what they did to these kids is child abuse. And so that took a whole new life of its own. Eventually, Little League went to 85 pitches, 4 days of rest in the regular season, in the tournament. And, I don't think anything really happened. They have like specific limitations for specific days of rest. And they finally readopted what Adams had suggested and what Dr. Andrews had suggested. And again, I think Rick, and to a lesser degree myself, I think we really saved a lot of Tommy John surgeries. I'll say this all happened probably now, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. But I think with the new pitch count rules, it's at least okay. I won't even say it's good. I even heard Dr. Andrews say once we had to bump up the pitch counts a little, up to 85, in essence, to satisfy Little League. So it's a fascinating thing, all behind the scenes. Rick never got any credit for it. Little League's not going to say, thanks a lot, Rick. You probably saved 1,000 Tommy John surgeries. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. That's just how it was. The other thing that I thought we did some really good work on was aluminum bats. A lot of people remember late 90s, I think it was USC was in an NCAA championship game with aluminum bats, which we called weapons. I don't know if you ever swung one, but I was still playing ball when they came out with aluminum bats. They were big, lunky, heavy things. They didn't really give you an advantage. They just didn't break, so you could save a lot of money. And but these bats in the late 90s, no rules. They were like weapons. There was a 21-19 NCAA Omaha, Nebraska final game of the College World Series. And, people were writing then, this is a joke. You got to do something with these bats. And if you wanted to play in the pros or you were a pro scout, you couldn't tell if this guy could hit or not using a weapon as opposed to a wood bat. So in any event, there was a local state legislator out in Staten Island, Jim Otto, O-D-D-O, who I got to know a little because he wanted to have all wood in New York City. And it took a couple of years and a lot of people protested, but eventually he got a law passed, only wooden bats in New York. And if you play in the Catholic League in New York City, or you play in the PSAL Public League, you use wooden bats to this day. And I think there was a kid out in, I don't know if it was Nebraska or, I don't remember where, but a kid named Brandon Patch was killed in I think it was a summer game. It wasn't like a school game, but it was a summer game. Got hit in the head with a ball off an aluminum bat and he died. And that really kind of said, what are we doing here? And eventually, thanks to Rick, thanks to Jim Otto, in New York anyway, they had wooden bat leagues, and you have to use a wooden bat. And oh, by the way, I understand baseball is a game of failure. I understand it gets knocked for being not as exciting. I understand you want to use aluminum so kids can hit a little better. But if you want to be a baseball player, you play in wooden bat leagues. That's what you do. Now, if you want to just go up and have fun, that's okay. Now, the aluminum bats of today are not weapons anymore. I still think they're a little better than wood, no matter what these studies say. But once again, I think again, mostly Rick, partly me, and of course, Mr. Otto, who got the law passed. I think they really did, all of us did a real service, whether the kids quite understand it or not. Again, a lot of parents go, I want to get that weapon, that $500 aluminum bat, which they had. It's lunacy. But I think that's better. I think the pitch counts are fantastic in Little League. And keep in mind, I'm jumping on Little League here a little, but there are a lot of travel leagues, there are no limitations. You can go abuse your kid when he's 12, 13, 14. There should be tighter things. Rick has talked for years about having a commissioner of baseball or a commissioner of youth sports. And I don't know if they can do that in National League, but they should at least have one in New York. And Rick Wolff should be the commissioner of youth sports in New York State. I don't know that that's going to happen, but my goodness, we could all use one set of rules for everybody, at least in the state. But yeah, those are the two things. I did a lot of other stuff with him that was fantastic, but those were the two things that I think really helped young kids and parents who are intelligent enough to understand what was done. It was totally for the benefit of the kids and not for anybody else.